Hi, welcome to Dish by RMU Culinary, a weekly installment where we show you delicious food. My name is Chef Brad with the Institute of Culinary Arts at Robert Morris University in downtown Chicago. This week on Dish, we're showing you a very classic Tuscan winter soup called Ribollita. And I've got a student here today, Michael Dang. Come on over here, Michael. And Michael's going to be helping me make this soup today. We're going to start off, we've got lots of vegetables to go into this soup. And it's a really delicious, hearty soup. And the unique thing about this is that it's thickened with bread at the end. So you can use any type of bread, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. So we've got a saucepan heating up, or a sauce pot heating up, and Michael's going to add a little bit of olive oil. Whenever we saute something in a pan, we add just enough oil to coat the bottom of the pan. So the purpose of the oil in this case is really just to prevent things from sticking in the pan. We want the heat from the flame to heat the pan and let that cook the vegetables. In some episodes we might talk about pan frying, and in that case we're adding a considerably more amount of oil to the pan where the oil is going to actually cook the food. But in this case we just need it to prevent the stuff from sticking. So we've got some finely diced red onion, celery, and carrot. This mixture is called mirepoix. So this is a very classic combination that starts most soups. We're using red onions today just for color, but you generally would use yellow onions, just regular yellow onions. So this mixture of carrots, onions, and celery makes up what we call in the chef world mirepoix. These are all small dice. This is a soup that we're not going to puree. So we want to see some really nice knife cuts because we remember we eat with our eyes first. So it's going to add a really nice presentation to the dish. And we're going to saute these on high heat just until they start to turn a little golden brown. Another important ingredient in this dish is the cabbage. And we've got two types of cabbage here. We've got just red cabbage and regular green cabbage. So we're going to add this to the pan as well. And these are sliced thin. You can add other types of cabbage. There's black cabbage, which is similar to kale. You can also add kale or add savoy cabbage or napa cabbage as well. You're welcome to add other vegetables to this. Some diced zucchini, some diced yellow squash. All would be really good in this dish. So we're going to saute this mixture for about 2 to 3 minutes or so. And then we're going to add in some other ingredients. While that's happening, I just have got one of our pastry classes made some bread in their class. So this is just a durum wheat loaf of bread. You can use any type of bread for this. Generally in Italy, when they make this soup, they use day-old bread. Just something to use up that bread so it doesn't go to waste. So any bread will work. What we want to do is cut the crust off the bread, because the crust doesn't generally break down in the soup, so we want to cut that crust off. If you want to turn that crust into something else, you can toast it in the oven and then grind it up and make breadcrumbs out of it. So we're going to, once the crust is off the bread, then we're going to cut them into cubes. Once this gets added to the soup, then we want to cook it longer to where it breaks down. So you won't actually see the bread in the soup to a degree, and you're not going to actually taste it so much as you are going to feel the texture of it, because it's going to add a nice body to the soup. So we're just going to cut this into cubes. The important thing about this soup too is you want to add the bread towards the end, once all your vegetables are fully cooked, and then the bread gets added at the end, and then we cook it just until it breaks down. As we see our vegetables, the cabbage has started to wilt up quite a bit, so it's shrunken in size. And now we're going to add in the rest of our ingredients. We've got 1 can of cannellini beans, also known as white beans, so we're going to add that. I have got 3 ounces of tomato puree, 3 ounces of tomato paste, And then we're going to add in 2 cups of chicken stock. And this is some fresh chicken stock that we make here on campus. And then for some flavor, aromatic flavor, we've got some fresh thyme. We're going to put the whole sprigs in. And then once the soup is cooked, we can pull the woody parts out, and all of the leaves will have cooked off and kind of mixed into the soup. And then we've got 1 crushed clove of garlic that goes in as well. And this soup will now come up to a simmer, and we'll just continue to cook it until the cabbage is tender and all the other vegetables in the soup is tender as well. So we'll take just a slight break. So after our soup comes up to a simmer, Michael, go ahead and season that with some salt and pepper. We want to add a decent amount of salt to this because we have a lot of vegetables in there that don't have any salt in them. The beans can hold a lot of salt. Our chicken stock isn't seasoned with salt, so I always tell my students to make sure that you season the food properly so that everything is really well balanced. So salt and pepper. Once it comes up to a simmer, we'll let this simmer until everything is tender. And this is something that you can let simmer really for a couple of hours if you're making a big pot. And it stores really well in the freezer if you wanted to make a big pot and then pull them out in smaller portions throughout the winter, because it's a really great winter soup. So then we're going to just start adding in the cubes of bread to the soup. And we're going to let that soup kind of absorb into the bread and then start to break it down. What I like to use sometimes is a whisk. So if your spoon isn't really working to break it down, take a whisk. Trade me. And just kind of punch at the bread so that way it starts to break up into the soup. And really the amount of bread that you add is up to your preference. It depends on how thick that you want it or how thin that you want it. If you add too much bread, you can always add a little stock or a little bit more water to the soup to thin it down if you'd prefer. So we're going to add just a touch more salt to this since we added the bread. That looks good, Michael. So now you can just go ahead and stir it. And then to plate up our dish, we've got a bowl, and we're going to garnish this with some fresh thyme, and then like a lot of soups and pasta dishes in Italy, some extra virgin olive oil on top will add a really nice look to this finished dish. So just before we serve it, we're going to pull out our sprigs of thyme because we don't want to eat full sprigs. And then we're going to take our dish and as you can see, the bread disintegrates into the soup. If you want to leave a little bit of texture to it and leave some of the chunks in, that's totally up to you. Some people like to have bread with their soup. So it's got a really great color to the soup. We're going to clean the edges of our plate. You see those nice vegetables in there. We're going to top it with a few fresh sprigs of thyme and then just a little bit of olive oil on top. And this is our Ribollita, a winter cabbage soup from Tuscany. For more information on our culinary arts program at Robert Morris University and recipes from this episode or previous episodes, please visit robertmorris.edu. Thank you, and we'll see you next week. Thank you, Michael.